Hi everybody, I hope you are all well. It's another cool, gloomy, kind of wet winter's day here in the south of England. Um, I went to Christmas market yesterday because I was going to go the week before, as you remember me talking about Storm Arwen that came in and hit the UK really badly, and because of that the market got cancelled for the day in which I was free to go. That meant instead that I went yesterday. Went by myself, and yeah, I had a good time. It was a good day. I did have a couple of moments of feeling a bit anxious, but I managed to calm myself down, and I was all good. So yes, it was another, really proud of myself, facing my anxiety, having a solo trek into town, as it were. I'm really happy with what I've done. It's been a busy week with work again. I've only got 2 more weeks of work and then I'm done for Christmas. That is insane. That is insane. We're 3 weeks away, 3 weeks yesterday, away from Christmas Day. How did this happen, guys? It can't be December yet, can it? Mental. But yeah, I've also had a bit of a struggle with reading this week, which is I'm going to explain, because here I am to review Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained by John Milton. Now, this is a classic, just so you're aware, that I picked completely at random. I wanted to read a classic that I had never picked up before. I didn't think about it. I just kind of went for the first classic that popped into my head. And so I bought this book, or books, should I say. It's both Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained in one book. And then I read it. And you can probably guess by my tone right now that it didn't go all that well. John Milton, just so you know, wrote this in the 1600s. I think it was like 1665, and then Paradise Regained, I think, was like 1670. So there was a gap between them, but it was the 1600s that he wrote this. John Milton had gone blind at that point, and he wrote it dictating it to his daughter, who then recorded it, and then it got printed, etc. And it basically is the story of Satan, the fall, Adam and Eve, the fall of man, all that kind of jazz. So very biblical, and tells that story. And I went into this completely blind. I knew it was in verse form. It's in blank verse form. But yeah, I was a bit like, let's see. And I wonder if subconsciously or unconsciously, should I say, when this title popped into my head, when I wanted to buy a classic that I'd never touched, gone near before, maybe I wanted to give myself a challenge. The fact that it's in verse form, it is so different than anything I usually would read. I'm not a religious person whatsoever, so the specific events and everything, I usually wouldn't go near. I've nothing against religion at all, please, believe what you want to believe and such, and I've just never been drawn to religion at all. And I have great respect for people who do follow a religion, whatever religion that may be. It's just something that I've never been drawn to. So maybe unconsciously I picked this one because it was so different from, because it's all in verse form. It's 200 pages of verse. So very different than anything that I usually read. A topic that I would never usually read. And an author that I've never read before, a classic that I would very easily just go past if it was on a bookshelf of classics. It's just like, oh yeah, there's that one, and just go past it. So maybe that was why my brain put that title there, and that's what made me buy it. So I think that also is why I left it till the last book, because of my challenge. Because yeah, now that I have read this, I have finished my challenge for the year. Maybe because it was the most challenging, that's why I left it to last. I don't know. It's yeah. So everything kind of in my brain all week has been saying no, no, no. But I have been persevering through, guys, and it took me the entire week, but I got there in the end. And so this is a very unusual review, as it were, because I am so used to prose. I do love poetry. I do love, like, obviously, like, I'm not a complete alien to verse form. I love any kind of various written words. I love poetry, like I said, and I feel like song lyrics are like poetry. I love Taylor Swift because she is a poet. I mean, you read the lyrics or listen to Folklore and Evermore, especially, as she is just stunning in those albums. So I really respect, all different ways in which writing the written word. It's just this didn't quite work for me. As I said, there were lots of things playing against me in reading this, from the subject to the structuring, etc. It just, yeah, there was a lot of things in my head that were saying no, but I got through it. From my perspective, I get why it's a classic, but for me, it was a no. Now, as I said, I've got nothing against the stories, in the Bible and all that jazz. It's just that there was some things about the way in which he described various things were a problem for me. I am not going to go into things which other reviewers, because I looked on after I finished it, I was like, I want to have a feel for Goodreads, how people have reacted to this book. And I think it's got like a 3.5 or something like that on Goodreads scoring. So I was quite intrigued. I looked around all different, types of reviews and that. And there were a load of people who were very much like, this is an absolute astonishing classic piece of literature. And then there were, who very much like poetry and stuff. And there were people who prefer prose who saw this as an amazing classic. And then there were people like me who love prose or likes poetry and such, who it didn't work for them. And yeah, I'm with them. Quite a few of those who gave it a lower score referred to how misogynistic it is. Now, I'm not going to go there, because let's not forget that this was written in the 1600s. Very different time, very different views on gender roles, very religious time. You can't deny it. And this is a book. It's basically retelling religious stories, because there's multiple ones going on at the same time. So those stories were very prominent in the minds of the audience when it was published. So I don't like how some reviewers said very much, oh, the misogyny is so disgusting, you can't have that in a book. And it's like, well, that was what was going on in that time. That's like I really have issue with people like censoring or banning books like To Kill a Mockingbird and such, and it's like, because of the racism and such in it. It's like, but it's of its time. It's like Gone with the Wind is of its time. Huckleberry Finn is of its time. It is what it is. So yeah, people scoring it lower because of the misogyny in it, I was a bit like, I don't necessarily agree with that. One thing I do really agree with those who had issue with it is he really likes to over describe things. Like, okay, I don't have an example, but you see how short these sentences, these lines are of the story. I don't know what page I've opened on, so I don't know what I'm showing you right now. But you see how short they are. He doesn't have room to play with, like, and there's another one. He doesn't have room to play with a lot of words. So he'll do these like pages where an entire page is just like describing a building, and it just kind of feels like, and why are you spending so much time describing a building when it's the action inside the building that matters, that kind of thing. It's not a bad book in regards to what he is telling. It's just that there were some choices that are a bit like, that could have been condensed, that could have been done in a bit of a better way. You could have just tweaked it slightly and you would have gotten what you were getting at, but in a different way. But of course, his words, his choice, all that jazz. I did like, it was very visceral. Can't deny that at all. I was a bit perplexed the fact that literally you start and you're slap bang in the center of a situation. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to get an introduction. Okay, we're just going to have to go with the flow here and just see if I can figure out. I did. It does have a good flow to it. And I did like various things that he did where the first letters of like loads of rows spell out the word Satan fall. And it was like, I see what you did there. Very clever, John. Very clever. So those things that he played with, they kind of like, that made me smile and such. I really responded to those kind of things. But at the same time, 200 pages is a lot of pages for a poem. It's really hard to get into, or at least I found it extremely hard to get into, because I prefer prose. I prefer a different way of structuring. So this was a real challenge for me. I found the characters intriguing, but I felt very disconnected from them. But again, I don't know if that's because I was finding it hard to read. I was finding it like it was a really sluggish kind of read for me. Getting used to the verse form, and luckily with vintage they are really good in that there's always references down the sides to footnotes to explain certain elements. So I was constantly going across, then down to read, and then back up, and then down, then up, then down, and up. But in a way that isn't a negative thing for vintage to have done. It really helped me, and that actually really helped me, because I read their version of their publication, shall I say, of War and Peace and Anna Karenina, and the footnotes for those were really, really useful. So I can't fault vintage on that. But it was just, getting used to top of the page, bottom of the page, top, bottom all the time throughout. I still, I felt a disconnection, but again, I don't know if that's just because of the structuring, how difficult I found it. My not being a religious person, I don't know what it was. I just felt completely disconnected from the story, from the characters. But it was interesting to read. I'm not saying that people who are not religious won't get this piece or anything, that it's exclusively for those who are not. I'm not saying that at all. I just mean that my understanding of these stories, I might see it in a slightly different way, or so. But I just, there's something that is just going no, big block no in my head. And thinking about it, how this was written for an audience who knew these stories so well, I just think I'm the wrong audience for it. So obviously, anyone can read this and enjoy it or not enjoy it, and they might be religious, they might not be, but it's just, yeah, for me, it didn't work. It didn't work. And I hope I'm not offending anybody when, in this review. As I said, everyone's beliefs are totally valid, and I don't go there. And yeah, it didn't work for me. It's a tough one. It's a really tough subject. It's a really tough structure. I just found this week tough and a slog and kind of brutal. But I'm glad I had the experience of doing it, because it was a real challenge and I didn't give up. And I think maybe because it was like 200 pages, I've said throughout this year that I give the first 100 pages a go, and then if I can't deal with it, then I stop. But I looked at it and I'm like, I'm halfway through the book now. I don't want to give up on this. And so I'm really proud of myself for getting through it. But it's just a bit of a shame that this is the last book of my challenge, and it's a no again. But I got through it. But yeah, it's a really tough one. And as I said, someone who's not religious, who doesn't know these stories all that well and everything, it was very interesting to read. I found it really difficult. Yeah. So I'm not going to do a reading, because it's very hard to find where to start and stop with this, because obviously it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's just, yeah, it's a very interesting way of telling Satan's story, following him around and such. It just wasn't for me, unfortunately. So there we go. So those are my thoughts on Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained by John Milton, the 17th century, because it's the 1600s, 17th century poet who told a retelling of Satan's story. So there we are. So my usual questions: would I read this again? No. Even though, it's a classic and I really put myself into a really challenging book, it just didn't work for me. Would I read any more of John Milton's work? No. The blank verse, it just doesn't appeal to me, and because of that, I just don't. I'm not interested in reading anything else that he wrote. Sorry, John. Would I recommend this to anyone? If I knew somebody who, like me, very much liked prose, I would say no. But if somebody was looking for an interesting classic and they did like, poetry and verse and such, I would say give this a go. But I personally didn't go along with it. So yeah. So those are my thoughts on Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained by John Milton. Have you read this? I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment in the comments box below. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, entirely to your side. And as I said, I hope I didn't cause any offence or anything when I was talking about this religion, and it's a subject that I always find a bit uncomfortable to try and give my views on, when like in this, trying to talk about religious stories when I'm not religious myself, and what right do I have to judge these stories? It's hard. So I really hope I didn't offend anyone at all when I was talking about this book. So there we go. But what's next? Because that's it. That's my challenge for the year done. I have read all the books that I bought this year. Or have I? check out my next video to find the answer. See you then. Bye.